Hey everyone, welcome to the EverydayFI podcast, and thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be talking with Christina, and I am confident in saying that every single one of us is going to enjoy this episode. Christina is a full-time nomadic traveler, and she has a lot of tips and tricks on how we can all travel for cheaper and longer. And just if you want to be a full-time traveler, she's also got tips for that. We actually recorded a second episode that goes into the tax strategies for living abroad full-time. So you'll definitely want to tune in next week if you're curious about being a full-time nomadic traveler and what goes into that when it comes to being a US citizen and taxes and living abroad full-time. So make sure you check out that episode and stay tuned for my first chat with Christina. All right. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'll be speaking with Christina, who is a financially independent nomad currently living in Greece. Hey, Christina, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I am originally from the United States and I was born in Kansas, grew up there most of my life, and then I started moving around the US. So I've lived in Texas and Illinois, Louisiana, and Arizona. I am a solo nomad. I never married and I didn't have kids, but I have a pretty big family in sense. It's an interesting family structure back in the US. I did grow up with five parents in three households in three different states. So we talk about a big blended family, if you will. So that's been great. And then just with my career wise, I've been in mathematics. So I've taught high school. I got my PhD so I could become a professor. I also worked with ed tech companies. And then I started my own editorial business. And I did that in 2017 and kind of pulled the trigger on early retirement just a year ago in 2023 in April. And yeah, I've been traveling the world for 5 years now. This month is my 5 year nomad anniversary, if you will. And I've lived among about 20 countries or so over these past 5 years, maybe a little bit more.
Wow, that's incredible. So many countries to live in. And that's an exciting kind of life that I think a lot of us kind of dream of. And it's amazing that you're doing it. And I know this is going to be probably a silly question to the audience because you just said you lived in 20 countries, but I want to know how did you live in so many places as a kid? And then how did you have five parents? Like that's what that's what struck
Right?
a chord for me. So
So they always say, it takes a community to raise a child, right? So that's pretty much kind of how it happened for me. I made my best friend at the age of 5, and her parents essentially became another set of faux parents for me. The mother of that family was my Girl Scout leader. The father was always there for father-daughter dances. And if my dad wasn't available, by the time I was 10, my biological parents divorced. And so that's when I started living among two households, going back and forth between my mother and my father's home. But then my best friend, those parents, the father got a job in another state in Texas. So, and we were so close, so we did everything together. His wife, so the faux mom, would kept her job in Kansas for a while where we were growing up. And so she lived with us in the guest room at my mom's house. So I had the community, and I also started to spend every summer in Texas, so with my Texas family now, and because the mom stopped traveling back and forth after a period of time. And so I would spend summers in Texas and almost every single Thanksgiving with them too. And then I would go back and forth between my mom and dad's house. And then my dad kind of moved around a lot in Kansas. So I was kind of used to living out of a bag anyways as a kid. And he finally remarried and they ended up moving their primary house to Arizona. So, yeah, I just always have been grabbing a bag to go stay at the next family's house and kind of started that whole 9, 10 months with, two of my parents in Kansas, a couple months, 2 to 3 months in Texas over the summer. And that kind of continued on when I got to university. We go to our fall and spring semesters, which are 9 months. And then the summer, I would go off and do something else or start to do summer school and work more, this and that. So I've just kind of continued this weird life structure as I moved along over the ages.
Yeah, so it sounds like your childhood kind of set you up for being a nomad as an adult. And I completely understand because I lived in 5 different states myself, although I'm not a full nomad like you are, but I definitely get what I call itchy feet. So, where I just want to change something big in my life every few years. And my partner is the complete opposite. So we have to balance each other. But yeah, that sounds like it set you up for exactly the kind of life you wanted to live. So that's awesome. Do you have a favorite or a couple of favorite countries that you've lived in so far out of those 20?
I always think that's so unfair to ask. It's like asking someone, who's your favorite child? It's really hard because I have spent time on Caribbean islands and Central and South America. I have spent time in Europe and Asia, primarily Southeast Asia. Oh, and I just did some Oceania countries, so Australia and New Zealand. Asia just does not compare to the Americas or Europe. It is its own entity. And there's just so much I love about that region. I did spend the most time in Thailand. And because of that, I spent a total of 8 months over last year. And the last month, I decided to take private lessons so I could learn the language. I wanted to be able to say more than hello and thank you. So, yeah, I've Chanran Pasatai Ka. I am learning to speak the Thai language. And I know I butcher it and I'm awful, but I'm trying. And so it just makes it fun. Europe wise, I am here in Greece very purposefully. This has been a dream of mine to be able to say I've summered in Greece, and that's why I'm here right now. And I just love the food. I think the people are very welcoming. I've essentially been adopted by a family already, and I'm sad I'm parting ways soon. They have big hearts, just like people across Asia as well, but it's different. It's just a different feel, and yeah, the food is just amazing, and the beaches and the water are fantastic. So, and I'm really excited to touch base back in Italy again. It's all about the food. It's beautiful landscapes, it's wonderful people, and of course, eating around the world is just a lot of fun. But next year, I'm getting back to the Caribbean. I don't have an actual plan set yet, but I love Caribbean islands. I like how they're small, so it's easy to connect in communities, I find, and I just love snorkeling. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I snorkel around the world. So that's kind of my cop out answer. It's hard to pick specific countries everywhere. There's just so many, and I have so many more to see and explore.
Yeah, I get that. And as I was asking the question, I was thinking to myself, Megan, you hate it when people ask you what your favorite place to live was. So why did you just ask that? But I also, I feel like that's a lot of listeners might have had the same question. And I thought you gave a really great answer. So thank you for that. And it leads me into my next one is how do you know when it's time to move on from the country you're in? And then what goes into choosing your next country that you're going to live in?
When I need to move on, more than likely is dictated by visa laws. Just how long can I legally stay in a country? That definitely is in the forefront of my planning. My original plan when I left the US was I wanted to stay in 4 countries a year. If I moved every 3 months, then that's fairly slow. And I can really enjoy a country and, live in 1 or 2 different cities or towns within that. Well, in reality, it just didn't happen. Things come up, plans change. So, yeah, but for the most part, I have to look up how long am I legally allowed to stay? And that helps me plan out the time. But the first, highest thing on my list is weather. I try and stay in the tropical climate zone of the world. So that is bouncing around the equator. I like really hot and humid places. I'm strange. Apparently, nobody else likes to sweat. But it's because I want to snorkel, and I want to snorkel in warm water. So, warm water that happens with warm climates. So, as much as I love Greece, the water is so cold here for me. I've only been able to snorkel twice, and I've been here almost a month. just because the water's so cold and I'm a wimp. But I've had two great snorkels yesterday and today, and the water is so clear. It's worth it. I just don't care for cold water. So I look at that. Chasing weather, is it rainy season? Is it high season? All of these factors come into play, especially because what I mean by high season would be high tourism. The prices go up dramatically. And I can budget that into my plan because of geo arbitrage. So being able to balance higher cost of living with lower cost of living. So it's a lot of logistics. I know for myself, I do significant hours of planning to try and make everything work out the best I can. Where I have a long list of nomads that they're like, nope, they're just going to fly off the seat of their pants and say, I'm heading to this next spot. I I wish I could be that way, but I'm not. I'm a planner. I have so many spreadsheets tracking info because that's just how my brain works. So,
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this community would feel the same way. We are spreadsheet junkies. And I also, whenever I travel, I do a spreadsheet and I always show it to my partner and he just like glances at it and he's like, cool. And I'm like, no, but does this look good? And he's like, sure. Do you have any, I guess, advice for folks about the visa laws?
yeah, it's pretty easy to look up the government websites per country. Sometimes it's hard to find a URL. There's a few countries where people are making spoofed websites because they're trying to do a money grab and say, oh, you need to pay for a visa, put your credit card info over here. So, some of that cybercrime, if you will. But for the most part, I always join a lot of Facebook groups for the countries that I want to visit, and more so specifically for the cities I would like to go to. The expat groups in particular, meaning expatriates, those that have left their home country and now living in another, those groups are really helpful when it comes to visa information. As a US citizen, or US passport holder too, we're very lucky that we can enter a lot of countries without having to fill out any applications or pay any fees. But there's still time requirements that you have to stay in. So Europe is a really, really difficult area, in my opinion, with the time structure that we have. It's just a weird setup, but a lot of other countries are a lot easier. For example, last year when I entered Thailand, at the time I entered, I could just show up and they would stamp my passport for 45 days. I could walk into a local immigration office, pay a small fee, and get another 30 days added on top of it. And I did not have to wait till the very end. So that was nice. They've since changed the dates, of course. So now it's like a 30-day visa with a 30-day extension. So you constantly have to keep on looking up, what it is for when you want to enter. A different type of scenario would be the country of Belize. I went there with the intention of staying 3 months, so 90 days. I enter and I get 30 days upon arrival, and then I have to go to an immigration office every 30th day. I have to go on like that last day, and then they stamp you another 30 days after you pay a fee and fill out a really short form. Funny thing about Belize, I was there during the pandemic. So I didn't stay 3 months, I stayed 19 months. So I had to keep going back into the offices, well, when they were open, and continuously pay the fee. But thankfully, because of such a unique situation that was in the world, they started allowing you to pay 3 months at a time. So you didn't literally have to go back every 30th day. So, and then there's a country like Dominican Republic. You can go there and essentially you get 30 days upon arrival, but you technically don't have to do anything. You can stay longer. They have a flat rate fee you pay when you exit. So like an exit fee. So if you stay over by, a couple days to a month, it's one rate, but their schedule goes up to 10 years. So you can technically fly into the Dominican Republic, hang out for 10 years, and then I think it was like 1,200 US you pay on the exit. And I'm like, okay. So every country is so different, and they change their laws a lot. But DR was fascinating for me.
That's amazing. And I'm sorry you had to pay the fees over and over in Belize, but I mean, I'm also not sorry because you were in Belize for 19 months. So that's amazing. Would you say these fees are cost prohibitive in any way, or are they pretty low? Like, what do they range?
In Belize, I was paying $100 a month. So now, again, these immigration laws change all the time. When I was doing my research to go to Belize, they at that time had a fee of $50 a month to extend up to 6 months. So you could keep going back. And then after 6 months, it would go up to $100. Well, pandemic happened, things were weird, offices were closed, and the government had changed the rule and they just got rid of the $50 a month and bumped it up to $100 a month. So for me, it was fine. I was still working online. I was earning enough. It did not impact my budget because I could account for it. However, I met a lot of expats that are of traditional retirement age, so older, and they're living on a fixed pension or Social Security. And the additional fee really did impact their finances. Some of them had to leave because they just couldn't afford to live there anymore. Other costs went up too. And others, had to work it out another way and they chose to stay. So you never know what a government's going to do. You are a guest. And so I don't think there's really any room for complaining as a foreign guest. I think, especially in the financial community, we just plan for it. I kind of things like that change. You've done all this planning, but then unexpected things happen and it changes. We kind of just call it nomad tax. There's always going to be some sort of nomad tax you have to pay here or there. And you just add it into the line item and move on.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense because, you're not living and working in those countries and probably paying their taxes. So it's kind of, they're letting you stay there. And so it's your way of giving back to them for allowing you to stay for a longer period of time. So I see it as, it's you giving back to them in some sort of way. So I get that. I know we were talking a lot about travel. And so I'm very curious about how you found the financial independence movement. And like, were you already a nomad by that point, or did you become a nomad after finding it? What does that journey look like for you?
Yeah, my experience kind of goes back to 2017. In the middle of that year, I quit my last corporate job, if you will, and I started working for myself doing freelance work. So when I was a university professor several years before, part of my job requirement was to publish. And so I decided if I'm going to publish, I want to get paid for it. I don't want to write for free for scholarly journals to get the accolades. I'd rather have the cash. So anyways, I built relationships. I did paid publishing gigs, and I used those contacts when I started my business in 2017. I cold emailed people that I hadn't spoken to in a while. I let them know I was available. And so at that time, I was just kind of messing around in Facebook. And so it had to have been late 2017, early 2018 that I came across some post somewhere that said, I'm 30 years old and I retired early. And I was like, what? Because I think I was, I don't know, was I around 38 or so? And so it piqued my interest. It was a great pitch and I wanted to learn more. And whatever it was, it led me to the Choose FI Facebook group. And then I found the podcast and their book. And then I learned about J.L. Collins and The Simple Path to Wealth, as well as Mr. Money Mustache. And then, of course, everyone else that's come from there. So I'm self-employed 2017, 2018. My business is going well. I just started to hear about this FIRE concept, and it was interesting to me. And new content is coming up on my Facebook page. But at the same time, all of a sudden, I'm starting to see digital nomad communities pop up, and then minimalism. So all at the same time, I've got three things that I'm diving into that rabbit hole. So financial independence, what is being a digital nomad, and minimalism. And that is how I started my financial independence journey, was taking concepts from these three communities and building my own lifestyle. So ultimately, I can retire early.
Nice. And I love how it was kind of a combination of three different subsets of the financial independence community that came together to that you use to craft your life, which is phenomenal. I love that. And so I guess what drew you to financial independence? Was it that you wanted to quit your corporate job or that you wanted to travel full time? What really drove that decision to go down this path?
I think it was hearing other people's stories about how they retired early by doing this simple formula, which was figure out how you can increase your income. At the same time, you need to decrease your expenses. And then you're going to grow that savings gap and you need to invest as much as you can so the investments can do the heavy lifting. I am a math person, so I'm like, I like formulas. I understand that formula. That makes sense to me. And honestly, I felt like I kind of had a dough moment, like kind of like, duh, I should have figured this out on my own, but I didn't. Like my light bulb just didn't go off. So yeah, it was the stories that kind of made my light bulb click on and say, you can do this too. And I can do it very radically by changing my lifestyle as a whole. That's why when I learned about what it was to be a digital nomad and to move around the world, and people in that community were talking about the low cost of living, I was like, oh, okay, decrease expenses. So that was the flag there. Then with minimalism, because I had a big old house, I had been climbing the corporate ladder, so I spent all that money. And with the minimalism and the digital nomadism, living out of a bag, if you will, how can I turn a 2,500 square foot home into one suitcase? So that was intriguing, and I like a good challenge. But also it came back to the finances. If I don't own all this stuff, then it won't cost me as much or anything. And then, yeah, the financial independence part, learn how to invest. I felt like I was behind. I didn't, I was fine debt wise. That really hasn't been a big issue for me. I've worked a lot. I've always had a primary career and 2 to 3 side jobs or seasonal jobs. So I was pretty good with keeping up with stuff. We all have hiccups in there though. But the investment part, I just didn't understand it. And I was embarrassed. Here I am. I have a PhD. I'm a math professor, but I didn't understand what an IRA was. It wasn't really a 401k, whatever the education stuff is. Every state is different. So like, I didn't get it. I did not know. So reading the books, it was clearly laid out and explained to me. These are just different types of accounts. There's age restrictions, there's deposit restrictions, this and that. And so once I understood the differences, then it made me feel better and that it wasn't as scary and I could figure it out. And these Facebook communities and the content that's out there, the websites, the blogs, the podcasts now have been so helpful on making me feel more confident in learning this information so I can handle it myself.
Yeah, the finance world is gatekept, and it's gatekept through all of the jargon and the idea that you can't possibly understand this on your own. And so you should hire somebody to handle this all for you. And don't worry, you can forget about it and put it in the hands of a financial advisor. And then they sell you a bunch of crap that you don't need. And not all of them, of course, but definitely more than is, is necessary. And I also feel like the finance world does a really bad job of separating out the good players from the bad. But it really is very simple. I wouldn't say easy, but it's simple once you start to learn, and it doesn't take much time to learn, especially if you make a concerted effort. And, I learned through making a bunch of mistakes. And I'm trying to teach people, okay, so here's what not to do and here's what I did. And it should not take anybody 8 years to learn this like it did me. So yeah, I'm completely with you there. But I want to go back to how you talked about minimalism and becoming a digital nomad, and that you had a big house and you had been climbing the corporate ladder. But once you kind of came upon the idea of living in another country for less money and getting rid of all your stuff, was there any sort of discomfort in making those really big changes, especially given that you had kind of designed a life in a very specific way that seemed in line with the quote American dream. Was there any discomfort in doing that and kind of like rocking your world like that?
You know, actually, I didn't have discomfort. If anything, I had a huge sigh of relief. I was like, wow, I can make a plan and I can execute this and I can do this. And so the biggest thing for me was as I was climbing the ladder and living the American dream, I was spending probably around 100 to 120,000 a year, just myself. Those last few years I was living in the US. And so I did, stop and I was researching all this stuff for one solid year. And just the numbers were coming out that I was going to drop my expenses by like 2/3. And I'm like, if I really drop my expenses and if I grow my business, the amount of money I'm literally going to be able to save is just amazing. There's no way I would do that in the US because I I do have addictions to consumerism. I loved buying shoes, purses, expensive timepieces, watches. I had a nice new car, got the big old house, and you have to furnish it. I was a spender. And I also like gambling. I would go to Las Vegas a lot or local casinos. Sometimes I would do great, other times I would not. And then I would also drink a lot. I was a big boozer and expensive wine. My dad's a big wine guy and some of the wines I like to drink, are $100 a bottle. And it's just I look back now because I don't live like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? But I was doing what everybody else was doing. And so I have always kind of gone against the grain in certain areas of my past, like everybody else, I don't know, got married and started having kids. And I said no to that. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted. And then later I realized I did not want that. So I'm really proud of myself for sticking with my gut intuition on those huge life-changing moments. So I don't know. For me, the numbers were just working out. Another thing that's really important about the financial savings for living abroad as an American, I have a tax exclusion that saves me tens of thousands of dollars every year. I can write off the first 120,000 of my earned income. So earned income, unearned income. And that just saves me so much. So in 2019, 2020 was probably the two highest earning years I had, and I was living abroad. So the fact that I'm making the most money and I figured out how to drop my expenses, that tax exclusion was phenomenal. And then I also don't have to worry about expensive healthcare. The United States is the only country that has these like crazy healthcare costs. And being in all of these other countries, if I need, thankfully I'm a healthy person, but things come up. And if I need anything, I mean, I'm paying, I don't know, $30 to $100. And that's like once or twice a year. I know when I meet an American, when I get asked the question, what do you do for healthcare? Because nobody else in the world asks that question. And it's just, it's sad that our country has such an interesting setup for that is so costly and bankrupts so many people. But yeah, that I didn't have discomfort. I was excited to see like the shining light down the hallway and I wanted to go get it.
Wow, there's so much there that I want to talk about. First thing is, so it sounded like you said you made most of your money in, I think you said 2019 and 2020. Had you quit corporate and started your own business by that point?
Yeah, I started my own business in 2017. So I had been building it up. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were in corporate, but after building your own business, it was even more money. And it sounds like, well, actually, can you explain what your business is? And would you consider yourself financially independent, even though you have this business? Like, would you be able to stop at any time? Or are you, have you reached that financial independence number yet?
So my business is providing editorial services in mathematics to textbook publishers, ed tech companies, and tutoring centers. So essentially like any math book that's out there, people have to write it, they have to edit it, they have to check every single answer in the back of the book because you have to figure it out first. You have to solve every problem in the book. Nowadays, everything's online, so we create videos and all sorts of different materials. A lot of test banks. Everybody wants to have 1,000 math test prep exams online. So we would create all of that. So it's a variety. It's the back end of math education. So I was a great fit for that because I was a high school teacher. I was a university professor. And then I had the editorial experiences because I had to be a writer as well as a professor. So it was just a great, and then part of my expertise as a professor is educational technologies. So implementing tech in the classroom, and I have to be able to use it. So I was able to create these videos and other tech related pieces for these companies. The other thing with my company, so I started doing that in 2017, but I did shut it down April of 2023. So I decided to do the Coast Fi route. Started the business in 2017, learned about Fi and all this other stuff 2018. 2019, I sold everything and took off. And then, living the best life, living around the world, earning more money, dropping the expenses, my business exploded. So I earned so much money. I made a lot of money from the sale of my house as well. So I hit my Coast Fi number at the end of December of 2020. In February of 21, I decided I'm going to step back as a worker bee for my company, and I'm going to let just my subcontractors do the heavy lifting. And so I was managing the company, and that would take 5 to 10 hours a month. That's it. And it's email, Google Drive, looking at files, sending them to the client when they're done. I did not have to be in front of my computer to manage my business. And I did that from February 21 until April of 23, when I decided to just stop. I closed my doors in my mind. That's the language I'm using. I just turned down anything that comes in. I want to leave doors open. So I just have a nice little email that says, oh, thank you so much for thinking of us. At this time, our schedule, we're just so busy that we can't take on your project, but keep us in mind for the future, So I don't say, oh, I'm retired and the business is shut down. I wanted to leave the door open because I wasn't sure, what if I didn't like not having a company, running anymore? And it's essentially a freelance business. There's nothing I need to do to quote unquote, like shut it down, just stop accepting work. So I thought that was very easy. I have not reached my full Fi number. I do feel like my Fi situation, well, I think a lot of people's Fi situation is unique and unique to them. I am second and third generation Fi in my family. Very lucky. I haven't met that many people that have parents or grandparents that had set their family up. So I do have some gifted income that comes my way. And so that's where I find it difficult to say, I feel very comfortable with what I have saved and invested, and I am starting to live off of what I have now. But when I'm older, I'll have Social Security. When two of my parents die, I will receive some benefits, financial benefits from those situations. And so for me, I see this as different buckets in my future. So I feel very comfortable. But the one thing I'm not doing, I have my honey pot, if you will, and it's separated into 4 different accounts. I'm living off of one right now, so the other 3 can grow. And that's kind of how I see that Coast Fi, I'm letting those grow. A lot of people say never plan on inheritances. I fully understand that point of view. I have the paperwork. I know 100% like what I'm getting. So I will be fine later, but I don't want to exhaust my 4 accounts. I don't know when my parents are going to pass away. We all die, so it's guaranteed I could die before them. But I have all of my finances planned out in these stages of life moving forward. And I feel really good about that plan. And if for some wild reason I got absolutely nothing, what I have in my 4 buckets, I can make last until it's time for me to pass away.
Yeah, and that's really smart. And the fact that you have it so planned out. And I love that bucket strategy that you have where it's like, okay, this one's going to hit at this time of my life. This one's going to hit at this one. I have something similar. I am one of those people who I'm not going to rely on inheritances because I have no idea. I don't have the paperwork as you do. So far, my mother has said, like, you are getting this, this, and this. But she's also said, I want to spend down my money until it's zero. So I'm trying not to rely on that. It's kind of the same way of thinking, like, I don't want to rely on Social Security. I know it's going to be there. I'm 37. So, like, I'm young, but I know it's going to be there. But it's more that I want it to be kind of, the cherry on top of what I already have. And you can still live in a way that you're not depriving yourself to a point. So, because you're being so conservative, like, you can still live in a way that is fully the life that you want and still be conservative at the same time. And it sounds like you are doing the same thing, but you've also got all of these different strategies of moving forward. So it's really smart. Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Do you want to learn how to set powerful goals and invest wisely? Have you been yearning to quit your 9 to 5? Then my workbook, Your Journey to Freedom, is for you. This workbook is your roadmap to financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, it's designed to help you define your goals, create a plan, and take action towards building wealth. Inside, you'll find practical exercises and tools that will help you identify your short, medium, and long-term financial goals, develop a personalized investment strategy tailored to these goals and your risk tolerance, track your progress and stay accountable to your financial objectives. Plus, there's bonus content like a quiz to test what you learn and a budget worksheet. With easy-to-follow instructions and insightful prompts, this workbook will empower you to make confident decisions and stay focused on your financial journey. Don't let another day go by without taking charge of your financial life. Invest in yourself and your future with the Your Journey to Freedom workbook. Order now and start turning your dreams into reality. Visit my website at everyday-fi.com/guides to get your copy today and start your journey to financial freedom. Can you say more about like your strategy? So I know you said that you learned about your, I'm guessing either 403B or 457 that was at work and invested in your IRAs. Like, is there anything else outside of that that you used to kind of save for retirement, save for this early retirement, save for financial independence, anything like real estate or, yeah?
The majority of my wealth is in 2 brokerage accounts right now. I actually have very little I have one traditional IRA, and then I do have an old employer 401k. As I kept on switching jobs and this and that, I would roll over to whatever the next opportunity was. So, but those two, are age restricted. So that's why they're in the back of my mind. I don't need them until I'm older. I'm turning 45 this summer. So I have these 2 brokerage accounts that I'm living off of that I want to take at least out that long, 15 years plus. So I think I can drag them out longer, but I don't necessarily have to. That's the hard thing about the spending down part, like how much you want to spend down now versus later. But I am utilizing these 2 brokerage accounts. The reason why I have 2 is that one of them I self-manage and the other I have professionally managed. By chance, one of my best friends is a financial advisor. And when I first met her, we were running around and hanging out together for, I think, like 3 months. And I realized I had never asked her what she did for a living. It just didn't come up within how we were hanging out socially. So I finally asked her. And then, of course, I was curious about it. And I had questions. I finally had a trusted person I could ask. And so it was great. And so I did ask if I could set up an actual appointment to meet with her professionally. And I interviewed her 3 times and decided to go ahead and have her manage one of my brokerage or this one brokerage account. And it's worked out great because, first of all, she is my friend. So I call and text her anytime I have questions. And so I definitely get more time than probably other people with her. But we also talked clearly about our friendship and the professional part of this. And I said, if after 1 year I am not happy with this, then I just want to cut ways, because our friendship is much more important to me than financial advisor professional thing. But it's lovely. So I'm very, very happy that I have a best friend that knows what she's doing. So that's worked out. In regards to real estate, I was very lucky. When I was 23, I bought my first house. It was a little town home for $110,000 in Olathe, Kansas. And I was able to save up for the down payment on that. My parents did help a bit with that. And then I had a roommate. So I was a high school teacher at the time, and I was making $33,000. So mortgage was a little over 80,000. And when I sold that, I pretty much broke even. I might have had a slight loss. I didn't keep track of exactly how much I put in for renovations. I painted and put in like a new ceiling fan and stuff like that. But I did live in it for 3 years. So I feel lucky that I essentially broke even with that. So then I started renting a lot. I was 26, started renting, and then I was 34, 35 when I bought my second house, my big girl house, if you will, climbing that corporate ladder house. And at that time, what did I buy it for? I really can't remember what I bought it for. I know when I sold it, I had a profit of $127,000. I had it for 4 years. I was traveling most of the time because my corporate job was 75% travel. I should have never bought it in the first place because I was not there. I would have been much better to have a condo or an apartment, but I was making a lot of money, so I wanted the big old house. So I feel blessed that I made, over 100,000 profit with that. And when I sold the house and decided to live abroad, of the 127, I put 60,000 in 3 or 4 laddered CDs. That was my backup plan. What if I sold everything and I left and I didn't like living abroad? Okay, these CDs are going to mature every handful of months, and then I can use that particular money for a down payment on another home if I wanted to buy one, or I don't know, rent on an apartment, whatever I wanted to do. However, the end of my first month, I went to Mexico for the first country. The end of my first month, I knew 100%, I'm not going to come back. I'm not going to buy a house in the United States. And I'm very, very comfortable being a renter. Owning these homes, they are big expenses. They're just money sucks. And it's a lot of responsibility. And I love being a renter, especially as a nomad. I get to go from country to country and stay in the most amazing places at various price points that work for me. And I don't have to deal with anything that goes awry. I send a text message and it's fixed. So I really love that. So it's the real estate. I bought those houses to live in while I was working. So it wasn't the type of real estate investment other people might consider, but it did work out well for me financially. I think I lucked out. So yeah, that. But other than that, yeah, the IRA, the old employer 401k, which is just hanging out in Fidelity and earning its money every year. And then my 2 brokerage accounts. That's really how I did it. I socked away so much money from 2019 to 2023, those short years working online and living abroad, because I dropped my expenses so low.
Yeah, and that's a great way to do it. And I feel like a lot of people who owned real estate through the pandemic, and if they sold it, made buku bucks because of that, steep incline that happened between the years of, I believe it was 2021 and 2022. I myself sold a condo and made like 100,000 on it pre all the, fees, but I only owned it for 2 years. So, and But I wouldn't recommend that somebody do that because that was a fluke. That was a total fluke because that doesn't usually happen. Usually what happens is what happened to you, like you said, with your first place, you probably just broke even. I mean, that's more common, I think, and or maybe making like 3 to 4% a year on real estate. So I'm a big proponent of your primary home is not an investment, it's an expense. But that's fine. That's fine. We just need to admit that to ourselves, you know. I think it's totally fine to own a home if you want to, if that's part of your dream. But if you're a nomad like you are, I mean, why own a home? Why go to each country and buy a place? That, oh gosh, that wouldn't make any sense. And
Well, and a lot of people are interested in kind of the snowbird mentality. I'm going to have one home here for, 4 or 6 months, another home over here. And I meet so many people along the way, and a lot of them are just on holiday, on vacation. And they are excited to meet a nomad, ask me a lot of these questions. And I was like, you can go and you can buy a home in another country, but there's a lot of nuances that you have to understand, especially legally, and not being a citizen or a resident. I go, or you can just find an amazing rental that you like. You meet the people that actually own it. You build a relationship and you let them know you want to rent it every year for these, 4 to 6 months, and you just get on their books. My mother does that. She goes golfing every year from mid-January to the end of February. They leave cold Kansas to warmer Florida, and they golf for 6 weeks. And so they've been with the same owner who has a couple properties for years, like 8, 10 years, something like that. So they get great deals and wonderful places to rent. Sometimes it's the same home. Sometimes they sell the home, but they have an equivalent. So there's lots of great ways around it.
yeah, I agree. And that's a really smart method to do it too, because when you own a place, you have to year round remember to, do the maintenance and the upkeep. And you also have to furnish it. And then you probably have to rent it for the other part of the year to be able to afford it. And so then that's just another thing that you have to think about. And it's just so much easier to just rent. And plus, some people say, like, oh, we'll probably go back every year. So let's buy a place. But you might not go back every year. You might go back, sure, but not every year. You might want to go somewhere else. And, I say that as somebody who has been to Paris 3 times, but I still wouldn't buy a place in Paris. I mean, for one thing, it's really expensive. It's a fun dream to think about, oh, what if I had a pied d'etat or, on the Seine? And then I'm like, wow, $2 million. Nope, never mind. It's just rent. I'll just rent. It's fine. Airbnbs are good. But yeah, it's I think I heard that on Ramit Sethi is I love his podcast, but he's a huge like into renting. And I think he said something similar, like, why buy a place when you could just rent it and not have to worry about anything? And you don't even have to worry about furniture. I mean, it's so much more relaxing when you do that. Like you said, you can just text the landlord or whomever, hey, something's broken, go out, have pasta, or, go to a market and come back and it's fixed. And you don't have to pay any extra. It's all included in the rent and everything. And I also really like how you said become close to the people who you're renting from, because it's also that they could probably, if you're in a foreign country, they could probably show you the ropes and show you some areas that are like, okay, don't go here because it's really touristy. Go here because it's way more authentic and you're going to get a better experience and things like that. That's what I like to do, is kind of get to know the Airbnb hosts if I'm doing Airbnb, or if I'm staying at a hotel, talking to, some of the like bellhop people and asking them like, where would you go? Like, don't tell me where you think I want to go. Where would you go? Because that's what I want to see. And that's how you get those really interesting experiences. And I don't know if you found the same thing, but I love doing.
Absolutely. 100%. Like, especially because I travel solo, I get asked a lot, like, oh my gosh, are you lonely? Like, people think I'm literally by myself somewhere. And I'm like, no, that's not how the world works. I open up my front door and I walk out it. And guess what? There's a whole bunch of people on the street and I can say hello to anyone, bonjour in France, or or here it is yazoo is hello, I think. I'm not saying that very well. Greek is hard. Thai, sawadee ka. So I can go and say hello to people. I do belong to a whole bunch of Facebook groups for solo travelers, digital nomads, the expat groups that are local. So it is very easy to connect with people and meet up. Today, I'm just hanging out on the beach, and a really nice couple was sitting next to me. And we started talking. Well, they're from Michigan and they're there with like three other couples. And so I ended up chatting with them for a couple hours. And then after that, by chance, I get a message on my phone, and a follower of my Facebook page is sitting behind me a couple rows. And she asked if she could come up and meet me and introduce herself. And I was like, of course. So, here I am in Naxos, Greece, and there's another person that by chance follows my crazy nomad journey, and she's literally at the exact same place I was, but she came to the cafe I was at because I had recommended it, and I've been here all month. So by chance, they're here for a few days, and she trusted my recommendation and she loved it. So that was good. So I believe it is way easier to make friends and build community as a traveler than it was when I lived more traditionally around the US. I mean, I was still bouncing around a lot, but I used Rotary International, great organization. I got involved in that so I could make friends. And what else did I do? I was a part of other organizations. And then honestly, especially the last house I owned in that neighborhood, I was the president of the HOA was a single guy, no kids. And then me and everyone else in this big neighborhood was just families. And if they weren't families, maybe they were grandparents and they had grandkids. So I ended up hosting my own meetups. And then I started hosting a Christmas crawl. I asked 3 or 4 of the people in the neighborhood if they would help put together not a pub crawl, but, a Christmas crawl. So we would go house to house, start out with like an appetizer. And then, you just kind of have different foods from house to house. And then we would sing Christmas carols as we moved from one house to another. So it was great to get to know my community, but I had to initiate so much of that. And I do initiate that abroad too, but I'm finding as I get older, I like other people to do stuff now, and I just want to tag along. I've really learned that a lot this last year. So I did host a coffee meetup here, and I met this awesome lady from Norway and a guy from Sweden, and we hung out, and that was super fun. But other than that, I've been kind of sitting back, and other people have been reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm here too. You want to hang out?" I'm like, "Sure. What do you want to do today?" So it's really easy. But connecting with the landlords or property owners who you rent from is 100% like the first step to do, because when you get checked into whatever rental you're at, they're going to give you a long list of things. They want you to enjoy their community, like you said, the local stuff. I don't have too many that send me to like the touristy things, but I don't stay in the heart of tourist areas. So I'm out in a small beach village, whereas on this island, being in the port village would be the touristy area. So I have to take a bus to get in. It's a little too far to walk.
I mean, even if you're in the middle of a touristy area, I feel like even still, if you ask the people that you're staying with or whoever is renting their home to you, if you're like, I know I'm in the touristy area, but where are the more local areas I'm willing to drive or take a bus or whatever, I'm sure they'd be willing to do that because, yeah, like you said, they want you to experience the authentic lifestyle of their country or their city. And, even when I lived in New York, like if people were like, oh, would you recommend, going down to Times Square, going and seeing Lady Liberty? And I'd be like, absolutely not. And, just because that's just, you're going to be kind of miserable too. And it's like, I want you to have a good time in New York, and you don't want to go to the most crowded areas in the city because you're going to hate it. I guess one question I have is, do you have any advice for people who might be kind of nervous to, do the nomad life? Like they want to adopt this lifestyle and they want to, be somebody who travels full time or, longer than just a couple of weeks for a vacation. And like, say, if they're doing a sabbatical, but they're nervous because they might be by themselves, they might not know the language, and it's a lot to learn. Do you have any advice for getting over some of those fears?
I would definitely say put aside language barriers. It just is not a thing because English is the first language for international business and tourism. So if you're traveling around the world, and especially if you're going to these, big hotspots, you are going to be surrounded by enough people that speak English. And hopefully they're nice enough that they will speak English to you. The other thing is that we do have Google Translate on our phone. And then honestly, just like pointing at something. The only time I ran into an issue it was my first month in Mexico. I did not have a washer in my unit, so I had to send out my laundry. And I was going in on a Saturday morning, and I can butcher enough Spanish to ask questions, but on the spot, I couldn't remember the word for Sunday. I was trying to ask, are you closed on Sunday? Do I need to pick up my laundry on Sunday or Monday? Because it's always like the next day for this service. And so what I was trying to say was, mañana, like two tomorrows. So, but the young lady was really nice. She grabbed her phone, opened up Google Translate, and said to pick it up on Monday because they're closed on Sunday. And yeah, so I was just caught off guard. I was nervous. But we figured it out, and it was no problem at all. So language, don't worry about it. And it's fun to learn new ones. In regards to being scared for traveling solo, join the groups. There are so many, and I'm not talking about Facebook groups. I'm like, pay for the group travel. There are tons of agencies out there that put together these phenomenal group trips of various lengths. So if you want to go somewhere, I met a really nice couple. Their Facebook page is the Penny Pinching Globetrotters, I believe, if that's the full one. I can look it up again, but I just ran into them in Thailand, and they're nomads, but they put together group trips. And so it does tend to be a lot of solo travelers that go with them. So they have an entire itinerary. These types of group trips are more expensive than if you would plan the travel on your own. Often you're staying in hotels as opposed to finding an apartment, and you're doing a lot of day trips, excursions, and tours. Whereas for me, my style of nomad life is I go and I rent an apartment for at least a month, and I go to the grocery store and I try and make friends, foreigners and locals. I go to the community events, I do my laundry, I go for walks, just more like normal day stuff. And another thing you can do, there's other groups you can join. They're kind of like the nomad training wheels. Some of them are called, oh gosh, you've got Remote Year and Wi-Fi Tribe and this and that. So the idea is with these companies, it's a travel agent. They put together a cohort, and you get to choose, do you want to be in an apartment with a flatmate? We call them roommates. Do you want to share your space with that? They say flatmate because you'll have your own physical room to yourself, but you'll share the kitchen and maybe a bathroom, maybe not. And then you get to choose, do you want to be in a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, or do you want a solo apartment? So a solo apartment is more expensive, but then you're with a cohort, and it's like summer camp, but for adults. So you have your leader for the community, and then every day there's something going on. So you can choose to be as involved with the cohort or not. If you need to work because they are targeting digital nomads. So yeah, so that's another great option. And then there's also a different type of program called Workaway, where you essentially get free accommodations because you're working somewhere. Maybe it's a farm, or they tend to be a lot of like outdoor type setups, if you will. The only thing with that, though, is that you really do, because you are working for your accommodations, you need to have a legal work visa for that. If you and the people that are hiring you for this program do not secure that, you're just doing it illegally, and you just need to know that, you could be deported, you could go to jail. That is, if you're doing that in a country that you're legally not allowed to work in. So, but there's lots of great programs and several different options. So you do not have to be alone and you don't have to do all the planning yourself. So why not join a group and check it out and see if you like it and then decide if you want to go off and, really do it on your own terms.
Yeah, that's really smart. It's sometimes people they get very gung ho about I'm going to travel full time and they've, never traveled hardly ever. And then they go buy a boat and say they're going to sell it around the world. And then they do it for a month and are like, wow, I hate this. So I like that you advise doing kind of these mini experiments of, trying it out first and seeing if you like it. And I would also add to that, don't just try it once, because just because you try it once and maybe it doesn't go well, it just might have been the circumstances at the time. And so maybe trying it multiple times in small chunks to see, to get kind of that feedback loop going about whether or not you could really do this. That's kind of the scientist brain that I have. Even though I majored in art, I still have like a little bit of a scientist brain where it's like doing multiple experiments are going to get you more and more data on whether or not you like something. And so I always just say, don't write it off right away, because it could be just that experience was not great and try it again. But if you try it, multiple times and you're like, this still isn't for me, then and then you didn't, sell off all your crap and move across the world. And now, you're not necessarily stuck, but then it's going to be harder to go back to the old life. Right. So,
Right.
yeah. So I really like that advice. My question now is, are you currently struggling with anything that you'd like to share with the community? And it doesn't have to be like financial independence related. It could just be anything in your life that maybe you're struggling with.
Yeah, for me, the planning and the logistics, because of my math brain, I do absolutely love it, but it is consuming so much time. I'm so happy that I'm, so-called retired now and that I don't have to worry about the business because I'm not working, because it does free up the time for it. But I have, I am very observant about my behaviors when it comes to this, and I have learned what I like and don't like when it comes to like accommodations or a physical city or town. So I need to listen to my gut a little bit more. I find myself wanting to go to places because so many other people said they loved it, but I'm learning to ask more questions. I believe that a lot of nomads do not live like I live. A lot of them are going from place to place because they are doing a ton of tourism. They want to see all the cool hot spots and go to the different places that, we see all these beautiful pictures with. And I don't. It's not that I never go and see cool places, but I am living around the world because I want to know what it's like to live in a community. And that's why I try and get involved, even though I am meeting up with more foreigners than locals, because the locals are working, they're the ones I'm eating in their cafes and going to their businesses and supporting them. But the community events, the celebrations, the holidays, stuff like that. I mean, Thailand has this awesome New Year's called Songkran, and it's this big water festival, and it goes on for days. And the community will teach you so much about it. It's that stuff that I seek out. And so when I'm asking other people about, oh, what did you think about this place? Did you join any groups? And they're like, no, we just, we went to another cathedral. I've been in 100,000 mosques. you know? So it's just different type. Their way or my way is not right or wrong. I just know I'm nomading differently than others. And I find myself wasting too much time on some of this planning. And I'm trying to get better at, like, if I'm looking for accommodations and I come across two that I think are really great, like, just make the decision already. So the analysis paralysis, I think we call it. I'm struggling with that. So I'm always happy to hear tips and tricks for that. But I am trying really hard to do my due diligence and then just stop and make a decision already.
Okay, so that's a task for our audience. We have a comment area on the website for this episode. So if you have any, advice for Christina on how to, make a good decision, not a perfect decision when it comes to accommodation, or any hacks, comment below, and hopefully she can learn from you guys. And I like when you said you're not going to all the touristy spots like and you don't kind of live the same way as these other nomads are living. I was thinking in my head, you're not in it for the gram,
Yeah.
the Instagram photo. So that's nice. And that's the kind of way that I like to travel too. I like to be there's sometimes you want to like see the cool thing that's the touristy thing, but I definitely prefer the festivals that the locals are doing and things like that, because I think those are so much more interesting. What are your current wins right now?
So I feel super, super lucky that I reconnected with an old high school buddy, and he essentially is a type of travel agent for people that have gambled in casinos that are on land. So I started gambling at 21. I go to Vegas. In Kansas City, we have several casinos and this and that. So I've been in these players club programs for a long time. I have no status whatsoever because I haven't been back to any of them. But anyways, I sent him my info that he asked, because he was saying that he could get comped cruises, and I like to cruise. And so I was like, okay, well, tell me about what you have going on. And he was able to get me 4 cruises this summer, and it averages out to be $150 a week. So talk about dropping your cost of living. So I am going on 2 Virgin Voyages cruises, one out of Athens starting up on June 9th. And then the other, I fly over to Barcelona. That's going to be on June 23rd. So I have to fill in some time on land in between. And then after the Barcelona one, I'm going to hang out for a little bit. And then I jump on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship from Barcelona, and I'm going to stay on it for 2 weeks straight. We go from Barcelona to Rome, and then we go from Rome back here to Athens. So I'm just going to be cruising around the Med this summer for dirt cheap and talking about the tourism stuff, because cruises are for people on vacation. I am not treating these as vacation. I am treating these as a cheap place to live on my FI journey. And so I don't remember how many stops I have total, how many ports, but there's only 2 out of the 4 weeks that I do want to do a tour. One is in Ibiza. I want to do this kayaking and snorkeling tour. And then another one is a stop in Turkey where there's some Roman ruins I'm interested in seeing that's always been on my list. So out of 4 weeks, I'll take 2 tours. Otherwise, I'm just going to walk around the port cities and hang out. I am going to jump on a public train and get into Florence and eat pasta at a particular restaurant I've been to before. I'm really excited to go back. And I was there with a friend. So I'm going to snap a photo, hopefully sit in the same table, snap a photo, send it to her and be like, haha, I'm back here. So I feel really, really lucky. And again, it's just about knowing people. I just happened to come across this old buddy who had made a post that he is, in this industry that can get cruise deals. So I reached out and said, hey, can you help me? I think that's a huge win. So take advantage of the people that you have in your network that are wanting to help you.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm super jealous because $150 a week, that's what I'm jealous of. Mostly the traveling, yes, but the $150 a week, I was like, ooh, that's good. That's very low. Yeah. But it also sounds like you're going to be having fun. Yeah.
And I'm in balcony rooms for every single one of them. I'm not even in an inside, tiny little room. So it's great. So obviously there's going to be some added costs on there, but the base for essentially your accommodation, your food, and onboard entertainment, I think that's a phenomenal deal. So I'm really excited to take that and see how that helps my summer budget, because it's expensive here in Europe, or on the water, at least in the Mediterranean for these summer months. It's high season. So
thank you for sharing that with us. That's going to be a hack that people can probably look into on their own, like tapping into their network and seeing what's out there for them, which actually leads me into my final question for you is, do you have a life hack recommendation or learning that you'd like to share that you haven't already shared? You shared so much wisdom, but do you have more that you can give us?
I know we talked about different ways of like renting and stuff, and I did mention that I try my best to rent direct from owners or property managers or real estate agents. And the funny thing is, I actually was just with some friends. I joined them on their YouTube channel, and we just put out a video today on my tips. So it starts off with, going to Google Maps first and just navigate to the area and where you want to visit and type in keywords such as real estate agents or property management, and you will see different companies come up. I rented an awesome place in Aruba through Keller Williams, which is a real estate agency that I was familiar with from the US. They're a worldwide organization. I didn't know that. And most people are paying $2,000 a week, and I paid $2,000 a month. So because I rented through them, I also look at the dedicated Facebook groups. There's, groups that are like rentals in Naxos, Greece, rentals in Koh Lanta, Thailand. And if you join those groups, the property managers, the owners, they're going to be in there. They have their listings, and then you can just communicate. You can find their websites. So that's another good method. And then, of course, we all like to use the platforms because they're easy. So Airbnb, VRBO, Booking, we like them because you can use the filters and click the little buttons, but I don't book through them half the time. I then click the message host or message on Booking. I can't remember what it says, but it's another messaging button. You can reach out before committing to anything, and you can ask questions. And I always try and, I'll ask them, is this the best place to rent through you? Typically in their profiles, they will have some identifying information, and I might be able to find an actual business website, and I can go out to those platforms and see and compare pricing. So it is, a lot more work, but I've been able to save, on the low end, like 20%, on the high end, 60% or so, by getting a little creative and doing what I can to reach out direct. So, and it's not always for month-long stays. I've done it for, 2-3 weeks as well. If I am going to go somewhere for just a couple days or a week, out of convenience, I will pay, for just a regular booking.
Yeah, that's a great hack right there. And, 20% is nothing to turn your nose up at either when you're saving money. And it just takes a little bit of extra work of messaging and going to a different website, because you're circumventing those fees, right? That VRBO and Airbnb like to place on things, and going directly to the source. So that's really smart. Thank you for sharing that with us. So we're at the end of our time now. So how can people reach you if they'd like to learn more and, maybe join you on one of your adventures?
Yeah, so if you want to follow along about my NomadFI journey, I'm on Facebook, and my page name is called A Suitcase and a Smile. And then I also have a Linktree site at Christina Golick, so people can go there. I share a bunch of resources. I am a spreadsheet nerd, so I have a travel planner, a kind of Gantt calendar that I created. I also have a file called In Case I Die. So I created a spreadsheet where you need to put all of your information, because if something happens and you don't make it, it's a Google Sheet. So I share it with my loved ones that would need to handle things and know the beneficiaries, know what banks have money for them. So I have resources like that. And also articles I've written about, how do I choose my accommodations? How do I rent direct? How do I make friends as a solo traveler? So all of that is on that site, and it's free. But if people want to support me, I have a Buy Me a Coffee page too, which I love coffee. So you will literally be paying for a cup of coffee for me if you want to show some support.
Thank you for sharing that. And I am so happy you were here. And thank you for sharing your story. And it was great to meet you, Christina.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, Check out my website, EverydayFI.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.